Hi, this is Oakley, and today we're going to be looking at how we can create a ceiling grid for a building. This can obviously be adapted to do a floor grid as well. This is in AutoCAD, and this is going to be using the Array feature. Now, the first time I'm going to show you is how we'd set it up to map out an existing ceiling grid, and then we'll have a look at how we can do to map out a new ceiling grid if we want it to be different. So here we are in AutoCAD, and here I've just got a spurious floor plan with some complex little areas here that will need to be taken into account of as well. So to start with, we're going to do the existing ceiling grid for this area here. Now I'm going to use a couple of construction lines just to start with, and I'm just going to go to the line tool, and I will have measured from this corner to the edge of my first stringer. So these are the stringers that hold up the ceiling panels. And so let's say this one is 118, and you notice how that went parallel to the wall. I come out of the line tool, and I'm now going to go where I've measured across to the other one. So I restart the line tool, and this might be 120. Okay, so I've stopped the line tool again, and I'm now going to go across to the other corner of the room. And this is going to go up. Okay, and I don't need to measure the other one because it will be exact multiple of the units that I'm coming across. And that's all I need for the moment. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reset my datum points and my coordinate system. So at the moment it's set to the world coordinate system, which has north at the top. What I want to do is I want to set this as a user coordinate system, and the way we do that is we click on the UCS icon here, and you notice the square in the middle. I'm going to click on it once to pick it up, and I'm now going to move it and click again to place it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the X axis, click once to pick it up, and I'm going to align that with the top of the point that I just put on. You notice how the X and Y axis is now exactly lined up with the X and Y line that I've put down. This is not lined up with the room. This is now lined up with the stringers and the ceiling tiles, which might not be lined up with this particular outside wall. What I'm now going to do is click on the top button here in my view cube, and you'll notice how my room is now beautifully aligned how I want it. Actually, I could now delete these construction lines. I don't need them anymore, so I can take them out. And the other thing that's useful to do is at this point, in fact I'm going to undo that because I do want that construction line there left in. But what I am going to do is I'm going to move the view cube, or sorry, the UCS out of the way, just because otherwise it gets in the way later on when I want to pick it up. I do need these two construction lines in, because what I actually need to do is I need to now draw across and up to give myself a point here, which will be the first point of my roof tiles. So I'm going to go up here, just use the line tool, starting point there, and I'm making sure I'm going across polar, and it actually doesn't matter how far I go, and again I'm going to go polar, and again it doesn't matter how far I go, because all I'm going to simply do is trim off these extra lines here. And the only reason I did that was to give myself a point there at the corner, which I can lock on my first ceiling tile to. As soon as I've locked the ceiling tile onto there, I can actually get rid of all these construction lines there if I want, or I can move them to another layer and turn that layer off. So I'm going to start by using a rectangle. My rectangle start point is going to be there, and it's going to be 600 by 600. And now, as I say, I'm going to get rid of all of these construction lines. That tile there, I'm now going to use as the start point for my array. However, as it is, this will mean my array is all inside the room, and I'll have to duplicate some things outside. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it and I'm going to use that point there to lock onto that point there. So now I only have a tiny piece of my tile in the array, and I'm going to trim off all the outside pieces. Now at this point, it's useful, if you don't already have a polyline that goes all the way around your room or your ceiling, it's a good idea to put one in here. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I go to Polyline, and I'm just going to draw a simple shape here. Obviously I could go around all the corners. It depends on where your ceiling tiles go up to. Mine are just going to go simply around the edges of the room, not cutting into any complex corners. Now be careful when you're doing this, because if I snap to there, I'm actually snapping to the midpoint of that line, not into the corner. So do be careful that you are snapping into the corners wherever you want to, and don't be afraid to zoom in and out as you're going around. And when I get to here, what I'm going to do is C and enter, and that closes my polyline. So now if I hover over it, you'll see there's a polyline lit up all the way around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that as a trim line once I've made the array for trimming off all the excess of the shapes around the outside. Okay, so now to create the array. So I select this object first of all. I don't have to select it, I can select it after I've chosen the array tool. But it's easier, it's fewer steps if you choose it beforehand. So now I go to the array, which is a rectangular array, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my 600 between my rows and my columns. Now, this is a trick with the array tool. If I click on these items here, it changes the distance between the rows and columns. If I choose this one here, it changes the number of rows and columns. Click to adjust it. As I drag, it's increasing the number, and I want to increase until I'm outside of my polyline that I drew earlier. Click to place it again. Click to pick it up. Keep going so I'm outside. Click to place it. And now at this point, the very next thing I want to do is I want to explode this array. So I go to the home and explode, and let's just explode that again. And you'll notice that now they are individual shapes rather than all one big array. Okay, so now what we can do is we can go into here and start selecting the shapes that are completely outside and just deleting them. But you'll notice that here, what I've actually done is I've selected some bits of my door furniture as well. So rather than doing that, I'm going to go to this layer here, which is my dwelling layer, and I can now freeze the dwelling layer. So now I'm not accidentally going to pick up any of those bits. What I am going to do is just simply select. Now you see here, I'm going to select, and that would select some that are inside of the polyline as well. So when you're selecting, make sure you're only selecting the ones that are completely outside of the polyline. So those ones there will all be completely outside. And I'm just going to zoom in here just to make sure that they are. And you see that they are actually just outside of that polyline. So that's okay. So I'll select all of them and delete. I'm not going to select these ones because you'll notice that a little bit of them is actually inside of the polyline. So I can select the top row there. And that's all of the tiles that are completely outside. So now what I need to do is trim. So I'm going to go to the trim tool. I'm going to choose that polyline as my cutting edge or my fence. That's the only fence I want. So now what I'm going to do is select the bits that I want to get rid of. And again here, don't be afraid to zoom in if you need to zoom in to actually get yourself tidier edges. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. Down here, there's no way that we can get those trimmed up properly unless we do zoom in. Okay, and you'll notice that we didn't trim them too far, so we do still have bits left there. Okay, and in a nutshell, that's our ceiling grid. So if I now turn back on my dwelling layer, you'll see in that room there, we've now created the ceiling grid and we have points that we can snap onto. So for example, if I wanted to put a circle or light fitting in, I can quite simply snap to the junction of those 4 boxes, which will be end points or corner points, and add in any features that I require. Next thing to do would obviously be to select all of that and move your objects from layer 0 onto another layer. Again, you might want to freeze, just do a select all and move it onto a new layer that you would have created here. Okay, that's all I'm going to show you there. In the next video I'll show you how you can create a new one, and if you're actually setting up a grid in the first place, what you'd want to do is you'd want to match the distance here with the distance here, so you don't end up having to have any slivers down the side. And you might actually want to have, instead of having almost nothing here, you might want to halve this distance to have a half of it on either side, just so that it's easier for the fitters, or more likely possible for the fitters. Yeah. And the same here, you might want to increase this gap slightly, just so you've got more of a decisive cut to make here, rather than banking on it going almost up to the edge. Okay, that's it for me. I hope you found it useful. I'm the Adobe Guy, and thank you for listening.